Welcome to the Cannabis Enlightened podcast with Dr. Leroy, brought to you by March and Ash at marchandash.com. I'm Chris Cantori, and it's my pleasure to introduce you to your host, Dr. Leroy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Cannabis Enlightened. I'm your host, Dr. Leroy, and today we have some of the most interesting, stimulating, and dynamic guests with a topic that I think is far-reaching, and I don't think that a lot of people think about unions with respect to cannabis. So as you listen to this, pay close attention because these two individuals have a lot to say, a depth and wealth of knowledge about unions and how unions are in the cannabis space. With me today is Grant Tom and Maribel McKenzie. And I'm going to start with Grant, and I'm going to ask Grant to introduce himself. And Grant, tell me a little bit about who you are and, what you do.
Hi, Dr. Brady. Well, thank you for the wonderful introduction. I'm honored to be here with you. And, my name is Grant Tom. I'm Secretary-Treasurer of UFCW, United Food and Commercial Workers Union, Local 135. That's in San Diego, Mission Valley. And we operate the union. That's what we do. That's what my position is. I'm Secretary-Treasurer, the President, and I run the union. And we represent, retail, medical, cannabis, and drug, also in drug retail and drug pharmacy. And that's who I am. I've been working at the union. I've been here for 20 years. And
at this union here in San Diego?
At this union, yes.
Oh.
I used to be a union rep on the ground, on the front lines, advocating for members on site. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So what did you do before you were at the union?
Before I worked retail at that time. I was going through college. My first job, it was actually my third job. I actually worked in a restaurant. I started out when I was a kid. And my dad and my family, they were chefs. So, of course, that's kind of where I went. And that work is a different kind of work. And so after that closed down, I worked at retail. I worked at Vons. I was going through college. I paid my way through school, and it was a union job. Back then, we earned $4.10 for being a bagger. And minimum wage was like $2.35. It was $2.32, and it went up $2.35 at some point. And I did that, and then it allowed me to actually, I had a family young when I was 18. I was able to do really well in a union job. I learned what it was, and my coworkers, they taught me what it was like to be union.
Some people listening to this aren't going to really understand that $4 an hour, as opposed to, where we're trying to get to right now,
Yeah.
a living wage of $15 an hour. But so you have a long history in the work world and with the unions.
Oh, yes. Things were quite different. Gas was 99 cents. I remember that. And school was cheaper. I could actually work. I paid for my own way.
So what led you to the unions as opposed to, it sounds like your family, you came from a family of chefs in the restaurant business?
Yes.
What led you to, move from the restaurant to the union?
Well, back then when I worked at Vons, I became a shop steward, and that is kind of a role you take on voluntarily to kind of be a voice for the union and learn a little more. My union rep at that time, it allowed them to kind of teach me and train me a little bit more about leadership and how to kind of hold myself. And I was interested in that because a lot of my coworkers, they mentored me. I understood what the union was. I understand where my benefits came from. And when I was 18, it was like, it allowed me when I was 21, I bought my first house. And it allowed me to have a life. We had things, we could go places. I had kids, and I had my son when I was 18 at that time. And allowed me to actually sustain and have a family and be able to, enjoy the fruits of the community and life.
So can you talk about what are the duties of the Secretary-Treasurer? I mean, do you handle the finances?
Yes, I direct the operations And the finances, we make decisions on how we operate and how to allocate the funds. We budget that way. We work together collectively, the president and I and our comptroller, to determine the roles of that and the daily operations and the direction and the vision, what the union is and what it stands for.
Right now, I want to direct our attention to your coworker, Maribel McKenzie. Now, our audience can't see her, but Maribel, there you go. She has a kind of a smile that when she smiles, it kind of lights up the room. Would you agree with that, Grant?
Oh, absolutely. I can see finally. Thank you. Oh, my gosh.
Okay. Maribel, would you introduce yourself and tell us who you are?
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you, Dr. Leroy, for having us here. And my name is Maribel McKenzie. I'm the organizer and political director with United Food and Commercial Workers. And just like Grant said, we represent a little bit of everything. Just for our jurisdiction is here in San Diego County, is anything from south of San Clemente up to the border, and even cover some of Imperial Valley as well, and El Centro. So that's kind of our area. And as far as for me, I'm an organizer and political director at the local.
And how long have you been involved with the union?
I've been on staff there for this is actually my 10th year. And prior to that, though, I came out of the stores, which is part of the bargaining unit, out of Albertsons. I came out to help as a SPUR, which is a special assignment representative in service. And that pretty much, that's something that's in the contracts. That's a little bit more in depth with the stores, right? So one of the things, I was at the stores, at the grocery stores. I was part of the 2003-2004 strike that I was definitely way younger at that time, and I was under my parents' roof still. So, but I definitely got really motivated when it came at those times. When at first I thought it was interesting. I started off as a courtesy clerk at the stores, then went on to the service deli, to the bakeries, working at the Starbucks department. In the deli department, I kind of went through all the routes in the stores and the department. So I was definitely given the opportunity to get on board with the union after being at the stores for 10 years. So in total, up to now, from being a union member to being on staff, just being part of UFCW has been a little bit over 20 years.
So now that the audience knows who you are, both of you, what do you do when you organize? Do you go in? Do you just go to a particular company, or do employees call you to come into them? How does it happen? How do you get to represent?
It definitely varies. Obviously, for the most part, for the unions, when the unions are trying to come into the companies, most companies are anti-union and they don't want us to go and organize locations. And more than anything, because what the union does, the union represents the workers, not so much the company. We're there to do what's right for the workers, make sure that we have a good contract. And a lot of the companies don't like that. Good example, Walmart is very anti-union. Whenever they do their orientation for the workers, they have for their employee orientation, part of it is to be anti-union. That's just one of the examples. But
Is that because of benefits, salary, or they just don't want you around?
More than anything, I would say it would be benefits and salary. I mean, for the most part, if people are not part of a contract, are not part of a union, they, for the most part, tend to have to go and ask for that wage increase, or they have to go and ask for that evaluation, as opposed to when there's a contract, they're guaranteed a wage increase. It doesn't mean, or it doesn't stop them from getting a higher wage increase if they deserve it, but at least that is there, and they don't have to go based on favoritism or issues that are going on at work.
So now you brought in something very interesting, a contract.
Mm-hmm.
So you two, as the union, you go in and help the employees to develop a contract?
Yes, we develop contracts in different industries and different companies. They operate different, and traditionally unions are perceived where it's like, okay, heavy-handed, this and that. It's not like that anymore. And I think in this space, or cannabis space, it's a little bit it's a little bit different. You know, I know a lot of the contracts we have that we've negotiated over the last 2 or 3 years. We put together, jointly in partnership with the companies, and we negotiate interest-based method. We use interest-based methodologies. We look for solutions for, different things and different elements that need to be corrected. And a lot of times, of course, wage is one of those things, and benefits also. It's kind of like, how do we sustain ourselves in the marketplace amongst all the competitors? As a union shop, the members themselves, we're the voice of the members and the people we represent. And so a lot of the work and the research that surrounds the marketplace, we were able to create a contract. That's where it's like there's an agreement with we represent the workers, the employee, the workers, and the company owners or heads. We come to an agreement and we set standards and rules. And these are like things that are written down that are guaranteed.
So it sounds like the unions benefit not only the employees, but the employer. So why wouldn't an employer want the union to come in?
A lot of time they fight the union because once the workers are union or part of a union, they they're not at a right to work place, or they're not at will employee. At will employee being that a non-union company can go ahead and terminate somebody without giving them a reason why. As opposed to those locations that are union, if let's say there is a suspension or there's a write-up or something, if the worker doesn't agree to it, they have the right to go and fight that and go through the process with the union and file a grievance, which that's when our union representatives get involved. They start doing an investigation and go ahead and help the members fight that process.
So it sounds like it's the difference between having rights on your job as opposed to not having any rights.
Right.
Yes. And I think the subject matter which we talk about, like Maribel was saying, sometimes it depends on the employer, really, when it comes down to it. We brought up Walmart, and I think, you're bringing them into the picture of this discussion. It's kind of like, it's a little extreme. Because it's kind of like, hold on here, those guys are just, what, we want the power, we do what we want. It's kind of like you hear the stories where they lock their people inside and caught on fire, whatever. You see these stories of Walmart. Hold on, that's not these employers. And I think this is where it's like you asked earlier, Dr. Brady, is kind of, do they want it or do they not? Why? And I think in the cannabis space, a little bit different, and a lot of the employers, these are like entrepreneurs. Their mind, I feel, my belief is they're different. We're like the generation and the culture is shifting and changing. There's care and people really care. But there's all the traditional fundamentals of business that a lot of people still operate by. It's like, hey, I want that control. And having a union doesn't mean like you lose control. You just have an extra, system of kind of vetting out fairness. Because when it comes down, Maribel brought up, like union reps help them. Well, we help companies that way. And I think in cannabis space, we're, how do we manage people? What's the culture of people? How are they nowadays? And this is where we're able to mediate a lot of these problems that come up. And I know if I was, I've been self-employed for a long time. My family, they have their own business. And there's always a concern, hey, I'm dealing with people. There's liability behind that. Am I doing right? And when you're running out there and as fast as companies are growing, it's kind of like, sometimes we need a little extra help. How do we deal with this? How do we do this? And am I a company that fulfills like, hey, I really care for you? Do I really care for you, or is it just lip service?
You brought up an interesting point that you brought up the concept of you don't lose control, you gain control.
Yes.
I think that's very interesting. Let's talk a little bit about the cannabis space, which is really why we're here.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But I think giving a really good background into unions and what unions do and what you all do is very important for the listening audience to understand this fundamental question that I'm going to ask. Why are you in the cannabis space?
all the unions are part of this, and they kind of like, they're kind of umbrella in a sense when we look at it. It's like, hey, whose backyard is whose? It's like you stay in your lane kind of thing. And that's where it's like the UFCW, we're the cannabis union because our understanding of retail is one part of it. So there's retail cannabis and the fact that cannabis considered a drug, we understand that. UFCW represents healthcare and everywhere. And so does other unions also, but all of the other unions, they don't deal with the retail side of it where they interface customers, where they buy things and so on and so forth. And so we were, set up that way to where UFCW's cannabis union, we're part of, Board of Pharmacy. We deal with a lot of the hospitals, the inpatient, outpatient, the handling of drugs. And in that ecosystem, we flow very well within that and our understanding of it. So we're best fit for that.
So is your union representation of cannabis companies just here in San Diego?
Yes, our area, like Maribel said a little earlier, we represent from Fallbrook to the border all the way to the Imperial Valley. So all the cannabis that's in this area we would represent. And we have sister locals, which is same UFCW, but they're a different office. They have their own autonomy. And like, say, in Orange County, they have their space. And then in the Imperial Valley, there's a different local. They have their space, their area.
So which cannabis companies do you represent here in this area?
Here in San Diego, we have Apothecare that is now owned by or changed companies to Ease, March and Ash, MedMen, and Stizzy. There we go.
Stizzy, which is...
So is that 3 or 4?
That's 4.
That's
4. Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
So the 4 companies now, I think it's important to say that those are all legal cannabis companies or legal cannabis dispensary stores.
Yes.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So how many employees approximately do you represent when we talk about those 4 stores or companies?
It's 580 something employees, so close to 600 employees.
Close to 600 employees.
Yes.
Okay. So over 600 families are represented by this union.
Yes,
Yes.
in cannabis.
In cannabis industry, yes.
Okay. So when did that start?
That started approximately around 2000, at the end of 2018. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's like when we, I think around 2018, MedMen at that point in time became union. And then that one location, Apothecare, because of MedMen, the way they purchased, sold, we had that one too. And that was the 2.
So how did that happen? Did they call you up and say, hey, Grant and Maribel, come on down?
During that time, it was like Maribel and I didn't handle that. And it was handled by the leadership group that was here before us. And what happened, actually happened in Los Angeles is what happened. In Los Angeles, they became union, and there was a lot of MedMen in Los Angeles. And so when they became union up there, all the MedMens became union. They became it down here, and that's what happened.
Under the same union or a different union?
Under UFCW.
So there's a UFCW up in LA
Yes.
that's separate from the UFCW here in San Diego.
Yes.
So UFCW is United Food and Commercial Workers, and we have one main one, and for every different location or jurisdiction, it goes by a local number. So there's other UFCWs in Buena Park and LA area and in Bloomington and other areas, but they're all under different local numbers.
So the local number here is 135.
35.
135.
Yes.
Yeah. And each locals operates on their own. They have their own autonomy. They have their own president. They have their own secretary treasurer and their own staff, and they operate their jurisdictional area.
So are there some companies that every time they open a store, wherever they open it in San Diego, that you would be the representative?
Yes.
Which one is that?
That would be March and Ash.
Okay.
And that is like, it's what we're able to agree upon at the time that we create contracts, with the members themselves, because it's a security thing also. It's kind of like, hey, we want a union shop, we don't, this is what we're, it's the same thing like our grocery store, like Vons. When they open up a Vons store, like a new one, the contract has language in it. They call it accretion. Yeah, they call it accretion, and it allows the store to come in. And so it makes it easier because they want all of it to be union, and they create that way. Mm-hmm. So if the contract addresses it, then it becomes like that.
Okay, so since we're talking about March and Ash,
Yes.
and March and Ash has a contract with you,
Yes.
that states whenever they open a store, whether it's San Diego, Vista, I guess Imperial Valley, wherever in San Diego, you are the representative for those employees.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So we talked about representation, and we also talked a little bit earlier about benefits. So what are the benefits that you guys have helped to negotiate with March and Ash for their employees?
There's a lot of benefits in their contract. The contract that March and Ash and us that negotiate, we created together, of course, the work standards, and that's like different work rules and things like that, the wages, and it set a schedule of wages to where, any member that comes in to get a job, they know where they're progressing to. And then there's also daycare incentives, because we recognize that in this industry, a lot of young workers, single parents, and it's really difficult to be able to find help. It's like, how do you sustain, staff and operate well, and a lot of the younger generation, they need the, and additional help. So that was something that was created in the agreement to create a daycare program.
Wait a minute. You're telling me that in the cannabis space,
Yeah.
you help negotiate daycare
Yeah.
Yeah.
or childcare?
Yes.
That was, for me, that was one of the big ones, childcare.
Yeah.
And most people tend to think, it's mostly for single moms, but there's a lot of single fathers out there. And even if they're not single, right, just the price of childcare is so much money that they have to decide, well, should I just stay home or do the childcare? Especially when all of the COVID was hitting up, especially when it started last year. That was a big thing where people had to choose, especially when kids stayed at home. They weren't going to school, or they were doing the online school system part. That's what came up, the big thing on the surveys. Because even once we get workers, or the majority, to accept the union in, we still have to work on a contract. So even with March and Ash's contract, it didn't go into effect until as of last year. And that was because we had to send out the survey to the workers, see what were some of the biggest things that they focused on, or what they wanted help on, or they wanted something to have on a contract. There was a lot of parents that childcare was a big thing. And there's some other ones that are single or have no kids, and education was a big thing. So we presented both things, education and childcare, and we were able to get child coverage, but at the same time, not everybody has kids, like I mentioned. So we were also able to get school coverage. So where education, it doesn't have to be part of the cannabis industry. If people or some of the workers here would like to continue their education, they could go ahead and do that, and they'll get coverage on that up to a certain extent.
So because of your representation, cannabis employees here at March and Ash, or maybe at any cannabis company,
Yeah.
have childcare and educational benefits.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
tremendous.
Yeah. It's a lot of brainstorming around that. And it was the creation between, company and labor together. And that's where March and Ash and us were able to create those. It's just like I was saying earlier, we operate under a kind of almost interest-based methodology. We look for where the issues are. How are we able to create this and make this work? And where we're able to really legitimize and create, an industry where we create career jobs I mean, careers, not just jobs, really. So that's kind of how that happened. And there's a possibility for many other things, you know.
So tell me, how did the employees feel about that? I mean, were they expecting? I know that Maribel talked about a survey was sent out, and I'm guessing that the survey indicated that employees wanted childcare. That came up big at the
Yeah.
top of the list.
Yep.
Yeah.
So when they got that, how did they feel about it?
Oh, they were excited. They
We're excited.
loved that. And it was like they didn't think it was possible. It was like, it's like that was the first time that has ever happened.
Yeah.
It was like a pipe dream years ago. I remember like it started like, was it 2005? No. It was actually 2002. There was discussion about it from LA. Actually, we were talking about, you know, how do we get daycare? Everybody laughed at us. And I just like, hey, that's a good idea, you know, because I remember at that time, it was like, you know, sometimes I needed daycare. The kids needed to go somewhere. It was like brutal. There wasn't enough places to bring my kid, for one. Second of all, they're expensive like heck. And then the drop-off times are funny. It's like they have their specific hours. It was almost like I was locked out from being able to have that. And it was very difficult. And it was like, how would you even get that? And it was like, nobody ever thought about it forever. And now it's here.
So, but the difference in what you're talking about, for your example, is you were in the retail,
Yeah.
grocery retail, and this is the cannabis space.
Yeah.
Yes.
Was the thinking there that, you know, why should you bring childcare into the cannabis space? Or was it more, hey, a job is a job?
Yeah. A job is a job.
Well, a job is a job, but I think for me, it's more because it's the cannabis space.
Yeah.
Because there's recognition of the members right now that are working cannabis. I believe what I see, they're culturally different. You know, they're younger for one, and the way they think, there's this ingenuity and this creativity that they have that's different. It seems like a younger generation. I love this culture, and it's kind of like, they're always thinking, how do we fix this? How do we help this? And there's the way they think, the things they do, they're just a little different. And I like that. I think it's really cool.
Since the cannabis industry is legal, unfortunately, it's still not federally legal. So it's not like the employer can invest anything for their retirement on a federal level. So we were able to include that onto the contract, where the company has offered something where, at least locally or until it becomes federally legal, they give them some type of funding for once they retire, which is some type of not a timeshare, but some type of a share out of the company's benefits here.
The majority of cannabis companies I've seen out there, they love their people. It's kind of like they have these relationships, and they seem closer is kind of what I noticed. And it's like, how do we take care of them? And I know when we were bargaining, like Maribel brought up, it was kind of like, you know, can we create a fund, like an investment, kind of like, you know, profit sharing in a sense or something? You can't really do that. How do you do it? So we created a system to do that, to where it's like, hey, you know what? You work hard, depending on what the earnings are, you get a percentage of it. Whether it's like some companies, they give you shares of stock and different things. But you could do that, and you can create something to where, you know, it can pay dividends, or we can roll it into some system when it does come legal at some point. But right now we're kind of stuck in this space where it's like, how do we create something? Because what's important here is like this like I was saying, the generation of workers now, there is turnover. A lot of guys are, well, I don't like this, I'm done. You know, people are all over the place. There's turnover everywhere. The thing here is, we know it's like when we bring somebody in, and guys, we know that if you train them, they're working hard. If they're committed, they work harder, they do better work, they're productive, and we can develop them, grow them.
Now, that's a great place for us to take a quick break, but don't go anywhere, because when we come back, we'll have more with our guest and Dr. Leroy. You're listening to the Cannabis Enlightened podcast, powered by March and Ash.
Hey, podcast listener, I'm JC Polk, producer with IVC Media. I'm just interrupting to see if maybe you have a business, a nonprofit, or even a campaign that's basically struggling to break through all the communications noise and clutter. Well, for more than 10 years, IVC Media, we've been putting together a suite of digital tools, data sets, and techniques to help deliver innovative and effective communications. I mean, we have teams in both San Diego and Tijuana, so we can help you overcome the most challenging projects in any language, or location for that matter. Don't believe me? Look, feel free to go check us out at ivc.media and see how we can help you. I mean, go ahead. Go take a look. What do you really have to lose?
Welcome back to the Cannabis Enlightened podcast. I'm Chris Cantore, and here's more from our host, Dr. Leroy Brady.
Where are you going with this representation in the cannabis space?
The way I see it is, traditionally the way people perceive unions or owners of companies perceive unions, it's kind of scary. It's like a loss of power. How do I work with them? But I need them. You've seen that, like in other areas, different companies, they've reached out to us. Hey, I know you got something. What do I need to do? And I think this is an opportunity, with labor and unions expertise, when the companies reach out, and the willingness to actually work and partner allows us to forage, forward in different ways we've never done before. And for me, my personal feelings here, I feel that, we can create career jobs and really set an example, because I love cannabis, I love this space. I just, my kids, they're all about it, in a different way. And I want a career for them. This the world is different now. Jobs are changing. We've seen how things work. You have gig market, you have all these things going on. How do we, create a good place to work? You can have a family and all that. And I think working together, I think the industry wants that also. How do I legitimize my company or my industry to where when I have somebody come working, they can be proud. Hey, where do you work? Hey, I work for so-and-so, a cannabis retailer.
You both benefit.
Yes.
That the company benefits from you and you benefit to the company. So there's this legitimizing air that happens.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It definitely helps on every level. I mean, not only even depending where, obviously the cannabis industry is becoming legal, it's growing a lot more and it's going into different locations now. But it doesn't go just by what's going to be best for the workers and the company, but also the community. And especially, I'm even referring to lower income communities where the cannabis industry is coming in. And some people, we got to make sure that we're educating the community, letting them know what the difference is from what was there. That was those black market shops that were closing from one day to another, but yet they were opening back up at the other corner the next day. But that was totally different, right? And now that it's becoming, or it has become legal, educating the community on what the benefits are to it as well, and making sure that if they do feel uncomfortable, just like Grant mentioned, right? We had people of all kinds of ages and depending on what their medical circumstances were going in and are purchasing the product as well. We need to make sure that we educate them on what the differences is, and especially from what's out there on the street, from the street product to what's the legal items as well.
I think that folks really want to know,
Yeah.
what does the union have to do
For the workers.
with the workers?
Okay.
Got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what do you bring to the cannabis? How do you go ahead, Mirabelle?
No, I was just going to say, so even here locally, even just the local elected officials, since now the cannabis industry is definitely growing a lot more, and there's some things that they were trying to pass at the city council level and even with the board of supervisors. But before they even made decisions, a lot of them went out of their way. They made sure they contacted us and seeing where we stood on it, what we thought about it, and how else we could educate them a little bit more about that topic, especially because they know we represent the cannabis industry.
Well, the members.
The members, our
Yeah, the
members, right?
members.
Not the cannabis industry in general, but the members that we
the
represent.
members as a whole.
Yeah.
And you know what? They were just, and that was kind of like their outreach, and that's really important. You need community outreach when you're creating rules. It's like, how do you figure out how that works? And so a lot of times we're part of that process, and we bring people together also to kind of.
I'd like to do a little, promo for your union because you guys do a lot of hard work.
They can email us. They can email us at info, like info at ufcw135.com.
Okay.
And it'll come in. It'll come to our mailboxes, and we can make contact that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if any of you, I'm sure there's a lot of younger generations with the social media. We are definitely on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at ufcw135.com.
Well, thank you very much, Grant and Maribel. This has been very enjoyable, very informative. I want to thank you for spending this time with me and the audience, and I hope to see you back again.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Brady, for sure.
If you'd like to hear more Cannabis Enlightened with Dr. Leroy, be sure to visit us online at cannabisenlightened.com and subscribe wherever you download your podcasts. Cannabis Enlightened is produced in San Diego, California, and presented by March and Ash at marchandash.com. On behalf of Dr. Leroy, I'm Chris Cantori, and thank you for listening.